on your notes. She is going to be the first commissioner of charities and corrections. They're going to put her in charge of orphans and prisoners. All right. She is instrumental in the passing of the child labor laws in the Constitution and the education requirements in the Constitution. She was a big proponent, a supporter of that, and really pushed that. She is going to be the first woman elected to an Oklahoma state office. And she is put in charge of the mentally ill because they put them in institutions because they didn't have the medications we have now. Jail conditions, so she's the one, she and her people that worked with her were the ones that went around and inspected all the jails to make sure that they were up to par, and orphanages. And there were several state-run orphanages. I don't know if there still are. Well, there's boys' ranches or whatever you want to call them. There's one at Perkins, but anyway, that's not necessarily for orphans. All right, are we ready? All right, Green Huron is a member of the group that made the land run into the unassigned lands. He's an African American. He goes to Kingfisher County, so that would be west of Oklahoma City, is where he staked his claim. He served in the Oklahoma Territory Legislature, and he introduced one of the first civil rights bills, which was defeated by one vote. And he served as a U.S. Deputy Marshal. He is instrumental in some of the legislature that was passed in the first few years of the state. This is the time period of the really cool mustaches and beards. They got some pretty cool stuff going on there. All right, are you ready? Huh?
He's on 7.
It's out of order. Yeah, it's this one. And this is Murray. We're going to study World War I pretty soon. Okay. And then the Tulsa Race Riot, which is kind of crazy.
Do you think Langston was the reason that community was there?
Yeah, he built the town and the university.
Nice.
Because it was a segregated university. It was an all-black university. All right, then Haskell is going to be the first governor of Oklahoma. His first act is to use the state militia, so the National Guard basically, to keep the Standard Oil Company from connecting a pipeline from Bartlesville to Kansas. At this time, there was lots of oil production around Bartlesville, and Standard Oil was trying to take over the processing of it. And he didn't want big business in Oklahoma. So he sent the militia to enforce them not coming and building a pipeline. Because he wanted time to regulate it. In other words, he didn't want Standard Oil stealing the oil out of Bartlesville. They wanted time to make regulations for pipeline. And he built the McAllister State Penitentiary. The prisoners built the bricks and the buildings. So the prisoners made their own prison.
That's some poetic stuff.
That's kind of crazy. All right, so Guthrie is the temporary capital, and part of the Hamilton bill that establishes the state of Oklahoma, Guthrie is supposed to stay the capital until 1913. Okay? In June of 1910, so 3 years before Guthrie will no longer be the capital, they hold a vote. And your choices were Guthrie, Oklahoma City, and Shawnee. Okay? Oklahoma City wins the election. They're not supposed to move the seat of government for another 3 years, but they steal the state seal, the official symbol of government, overnight and move it from Guthrie to Oklahoma City, to the Lee Huckins Hotel. This one right here. And that's your first state capital until they can get a capital built. And so Guthrie sued because they were supposed to retain the capital for 3 more years, and they lost the lawsuit. So in 1910, instead of 1913, Oklahoma City becomes the capital because they steal the state seal. That's hard to say. And move it in secret and say, oh, guess what? On Monday morning, Lee Huckins Hotel is now your capital building in Oklahoma City. And Guthrie got mad and sued, but they didn't win. The first building in the first picture, this is the capital, because it was territory capital, then it was the first state capital in Guthrie. I think it's a museum now. And then this is the Lee Huckins Hotel in Oklahoma City. I don't know if it's still there or not. Oh, look.
Seeing the technology difference like before and after World War I, kind of incredible.
Yep, the Lee Huckins Hotel is still there. Downtown. Actually, I think you walk by it when you go to the Oklahoma City Art Museum, like when we took our art trip. It's down in that area. All right, are we ready? All right, so then they have to start building the Capitol. So during Lee Cruz's administration, when he was governor, beginning in June of 1914, they start building the Capitol, and they finish it in 1917, but they don't have enough money for a dome. So the plans for the dome are postponed. And for a long time, we were the only state capital that didn't have a dome. Then in the 1990s, Governor Keating decided we needed a dome. So they built the dome and put the big sculpture on the top, which disrupted the footings of the building. And they started having foundation trouble, like the foundation started cracking because of the weight. So they had to redo the foundation. And then they started redoing the stonework and things around. That's why they've had scaffolding around the Capitol building for a while. But this is, how many of you guys have been to the state Capitol? One. This is the inside looking up.
Dude, it
into
looks
the dome.
so cool.
And it is very cool. So they ended construction in 2002. And so the sculpture is a Native American statue that doesn't look very big in the picture, but it's ginormous. It's like larger than life.
The first time I went there was the day that I got my braces put on.
Oh, okay. All right, so oil is going to be discovered in Indian Territory in 1859, but there's not a huge demand for it. The first well is drilled in 1888 in the Choctaw Nation in Indian Territory. And as you can see, the oil derricks were wooden. Okay, so, and it's about the size of a windmill. So how close to the surface is this oil that they're able to drill? It's pretty close. There were places in eastern Oklahoma where the oil actually seeps to the surface and you have pools of oil, like just on the ground like a pond. So this is the first commercial oil well is going to be drilled near Bartlesville, I can't talk today, in Indian Territory in 1897. So all of this stuff you see spewing out here, this is the oil strike at near Bartlesville. All of that's oil. Like the pressure throws the pipe out where they're drilling, and the oil spews until you cap it. So if you were a worker on that, you're going to get covered in oil. It's like raining oil. All right, in 1905, south of Tulsa, they hit a huge oil field. They call it the Glen Pool because there's so many, it's like a great big swimming pool of oil underneath that area, south of Tulsa. They still have tons of oil production there. Wildcatters were independent oil producers. That's how my family came to Roger Mills County on my dad's side. His grandfather was a wildcatter. It was discovered by Bob Gilbreth and Frank Chesley. It produced 55,000 barrels a day.
God.
That is a lot of oil. The biggest part was transportation. Transportation routes were not well established in 1905. This is before statehood. It's still Indian Territory. And you have a limited number of railroads. So you can produce all this stuff, but you don't have a way to efficiently get it to market. So the answer to that was pipeline. So they start building pipelines because it's cheaper and more efficient to transport it through a pipeline than it is on a truck or a train. Especially since they didn't have the roads for the trucks. I mean, think about it. It's 1905. People don't own cars. Majority of people are still riding horses and pulling wagons, okay? So you're not looking at a very efficient way to transport it. By 1907, so by statehood, the Glen Pool oil reached refineries in Port Arthur, Texas. So they built pipelines all the way down to the Gulf in Texas. This was one of the biggest oil producers in the world. Oklahoma's going to be the oil capital for a long time. We're going to produce more oil than some foreign countries. Tulsa becomes the oil capital of the world. That's why Tulsa has all of its fancy buildings, and it's a big metropolis area because that's where the oil was. By 1907, Oklahoma produced more oil than any other state and any other country in the world. And it brought large companies like Texaco, Gulf Oil, Standard Oil to Oklahoma, and they all settled in Tulsa because it was just north of the big oil field. That's why Tulsa was so big. The Corporation Commission was created to regulate the oil industry because it's kind of not well regulated, and there's lots of illegal stuff going on, so the state steps in. And it creates boom towns. Boom towns didn't have very good law enforcement. They were not places that the oil field workers took their families because they were kind of wild. Yeah. They were pretty dangerous. Like, people were still shooting each other in the street. So.
Is that why that one restaurant in Elk City is called Boomtown?
A reference to this, yeah. Probably. Either a reference to this or a reference to boomers because it's kind of sports oriented.
Yeah.
So. One of the two. All right, so in Drumright, Oklahoma in 1914, you had all of these oil wells caught on fire. And they didn't have CUD pressure control at the time, okay? So they're going to burn for a really long time. And the boom towns literally would spring up overnight. Like, look at this one, it's a tent city. This is a town outside the oil field. So this is where your workers are going to be staying until they can get structures built. And this one shows you, this is the town of Drumright. There are more oil derricks than there are houses. We actually had a functioning, active oil well drilled on the Capitol grounds, right next to the Capitol building. They extracted oil from there, too. All right, next thing we'll learn about is the oil industry. I have some videos and stuff we're going to watch. It shows you just how crazy all of this was. I think that there's a video about the Ida Glen. They used to name the oil wells after family members, kind of like you'd name a ship or something.
Well, here's my old well, Cletus.
I think he drank some of it.
Professor Leo here with my newly portable assistant, Piper.
That's right.
To all.
We turn it down.
Today, Piper and I are at Woolaroc Museum in Bartlesville, weaving a tale of Oklahoma's oil heritage.
Nice. You should write bumper stickers.
I should make you my hood ornament.
Stay quiet now.
He just goes, I'm gonna put your head on a pipe.
Woolaroc is but one stunning example of Oklahoma's oil heritage. This museum and wildlife preserve was gifted to the state by one of our great oil barons.
Who?
I'll save that secret for later.
At Bartlesville is one of the great Oklahoma boom towns.
Lay down the boom to the left to the boom!
I'm
At
gonna
the
shoot
turn of the
myself.
century, and Bartlesville veterans spread out across Oklahoma.
Hey, it could be worse.
This day, fast growth in small areas.
Shut up, that's right.
Boom towns.
Boom!
Hey, I'm going to have some entertainment in my day, okay?
While others owe their very existence to the petroleum bonanza.
Bonanza. Good word.
Okay, you see what the street's made out of?
Oil.
It's
Oil.
paved, no, it's paved with bricks like the streets in Elk City. That's how they used to pave all of the
And
streets in the
then
town.
they replace cement with
Where
oil.
neither the cooks
No.
nor the food.
Yeah, they actually didn't use cars, they used
There
boats,
wasn't even enough time to
and they
sweep
would
the floors.
put boats in the oil.
It's like that one place in Illinois.
You guys are delusional.
Now I know what you're thinking.
I wish his
Spreading
Siri-
Okay, even I can't take this with me.
I wish his Siri assistant would blow up
All
and kill him.
expensive buildings.
Okay, I can't even take it. It's torturing myself. Okay.
I would walk up to that guy if I see him in real life. I would talk to his Siri. Hey Siri, set bomb for 3 seconds.
All right, Bartlesville has all kinds of, you guys know where Bartlesville is, right?
No.
No?
I've
You
never
know where
even heard
Enid
of.
is?
I've never even
Yeah.
heard of Bartlesville.
Yeah, I know where he is.
Okay, so you're talking about northern part of Oklahoma to the east by Kansas.
I think I've
And Bartlesville is big because of the oil industry, because there were big oil strikes around Bartlesville,
Is
so
it?
it grew up.
Is it near a river?
I don't remember.
That might be a different.
I mean, you have like a big Phillips 66 refinery or production area.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's funky. Whoa, bro.
Tulsa has,
That's Saxton Hill.
this is at one of, I think it's at the museum, one of the museums, but anyway, during Route 66 era when people like the 40s and 50s when people were driving around,
Yeah.
this was built as one of the locations of tourist attraction. These are the people down here, that's how tall it is.
Tulsa looks so different depending on which part of it you go to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of poor people there.
Yeah. Okay, this is what Tulsa looked like at one time. No, this is our state capital without a dome. And here's your oil wells downtown around the capital. And they're producing oil. Okay, this is, Tulsa. No.
You're walking down
And
the
this
street.
is what your oil derricks are like. It's nothing like they are now, they're made out of wood.
You're just walking down the street and one like spews like boiling hot oil in your face.
Here you go. Here's a town with oil derricks and all around.
Do you think? I want to see. I bet there's at least one, just like an oil rig going straight through someone's house. I was like,
Not-
well, I've been in my house, but there's a lot of oil under there, so I just kind of put it on top.
But it's crazy to me how many oil derricks that you see. When I was a kid, 80s, when they had the oil boom in the 80s, 1980s rolling. You want to pass this class?